So just a reminder that today's session is recorded, and you will be able to find the recording on our website, on our webinar page, where you'll also be able to find all the previous 14 webinars, as this is number 15, which seems quite incredible. I feel a little bit like we're marking off how long we've been in lockdown by the number of webinars that we've done, as they start to chalk up. So thank you all for coming to today. We're really lucky to have a guest speaker, Chris, from Dorset Cyber Police, and he'll go through his presentation shortly. And we've also got some updates around funding, which I think you'll find particularly useful. There has been quite a lot of information that's been coming out from the Institute of Fundraising and also the funding regulator, and it can be very difficult to keep up with those incidental messages that come out from them. So Anita will be going through an update. As we move into our 15th webinar, it's probably a little bit of a time for us to reflect on the distance travelled, really, I think, for all of us on this journey through COVID-19. And I think for some of us, it's been a time of not being able to pause or take breath. And as somebody who took leave last week, I can assure you it's really important. And it is a time, I think, as we move into the next recovery phase of COVID-19, that we begin to allow ourselves a little bit of breath, a little bit of time to catch up on family, and maybe also be able to take a pause for our own personal mental health and well-being. And I would remind you that we do have webinar information on the support that's available from Live Well Dorset, and also online to be able to help you and the people that you work with. So on that note of keeping safe and taking a breath, I'm going to hand over to Julie, who's going to introduce today's guest speaker. Thank you, Julie.
Good morning, everyone. So yes, so as Paula said, we have Chris Conroy with us today from Dorset Police, who's going to talk to us about how to avoid scams. So over to you, Chris.
Better take myself off mute first. Again, don't want to be the guy that does computers for a job and can't use Zoom. Just going to share my screen and do the customary thing of making sure everyone can see it. So hopefully... Nope, that's not gone to plan at all. Let's try that again. Off to a good start. Okay. See, this worked perfectly a moment ago when I jumped in a minute or two early just to make sure everything was working okay. It worked perfectly. Can everyone see? If someone could give, yeah, excellent. Just a white background, hopefully now with some black text on it. Right, after that debacle, I suppose I'll introduce myself. My name's Chris Conroy, and I'm the Cyber Protect Officer for Dorset Police. And under usual circumstances, I'll be going out and about speaking to people, organisations, charities, community groups about cybercrime and things that people can do to help keep themselves safe online. Obviously, at the moment, not too many businesses really that keen on having strangers come in and talk to them about stuff. So it's really good to have the opportunity to speak to you today. So thank you very much for having me along. I'm going to start off by talking very briefly about the distinctions of the types of cybercrime and the things that we have reported to us on an almost daily basis. And we'll start off by talking about what we call cyber-enabled and cyber-dependent crimes. So to give you an idea as to the sort of scale of the problem, how big the issue is nowadays, I'll show you some statistics from the Office of National Statistics. Now these cover the period of September 2018 to September 2019, the last complete year, basically, of crime recording stats that we have available at the moment. So we can see here, if you take violent crime, theft, vehicle offences, burglaries, knife crime, robberies and murders, in that 12-month period, 5.8 million offences have been reported. Now, if we take what we'd probably consider to be relatively narrow brackets of crime, so Computer Misuse Act offences, this is ransomware, viruses and things along those lines, and fraud offences, that stacks up to 4.8 million just in those two small areas alone. Again, hopefully gives you a bit of an appreciation as to the scale of the issue that we're facing. So I include fraud in these figures as well. because in Dorset, and I think it's a national trend, about 80% of fraud that's reported has some sort of cyber element to it. So that'll be your BT engineer calling to tell you there's something wrong with your phone line, or phishing emails that are trying to take some money, or basically get you to part with some hard-earned cash. And again, hopefully to give you an appreciation as to how big the issue is in Dorset specifically, I had a look at the figures this morning. So between July 2019 and July 2020, £16.5 million was lost to fraud alone, just in Dorset. And the top 4 causes of those losses: online shopping, check, plastic card or online bank account fraud, advanced fee fraud rather. So this is someone sending you an email saying, if you pay us 50 quid as a down payment on something, or it could be charitable donations and things like that. And lastly, number 4 is computer service fraud. So these are people calling up to say there's something wrong with your computer, but we can help you fix it. 16.5 million over that sort of time period is huge, obviously, for a relatively sleepy county like ours. But if we have a look at the figures from the last few months alone, we can really get a feel for how the current situation has quite a serious impact, really, on what's going on. So in January, £864,000 was lost to fraud. February, 1.2 million. March, 1.4 million. April, 1.6 million. And in May, £1.9 million lost to fraud. And this is, again, just in Dorset. I think breaking that down into different sort of categories, we can see £25,000 lost in 1 month to mandate fraud. So this is fake invoices coming from suppliers. £32,000 lost to online shopping scams. So people thinking they're buying PPE, for example, masks, hand gel, stuff like that. Again, just in May, 32 grand lost, just in Dorset. So we move on to have a look at a few quick examples of the types of things that we class as cyber enabled and cyber dependent. So phishing emails, so theft of your login credentials, romance fraud. So these are the sort of scams where people are tricked into starting a relationship with somebody online. I have a very real concern, obviously, at the moment that with isolation, people being alone, having a bit more time to kill, maybe we're going to see a spike in romance fraud in the next sort of coming weeks and months. Obviously, that hasn't come to fruition yet, but it's a very real concern that we do have. Fraudulent sales, advanced fee scams, and mandate fraud, as I've already touched upon, huge figures for us at the moment, huge features of our sort of cybercrime landscape. And then we have cyber dependent crime. So this is computer versus computer, ransomware, distributed denial of service. So that's using the computer to take somebody else's computer off the internet, essentially. And remote access Trojans. Now, it's these top two, the top one and the bottom one, rather, that are probably going to be the biggest concerns for people like us. Ransomware. If we go back into our business, we get an email from someone that looks like it might be something important. Double click on that document in there. We could be infected with something. I'll show you an example in a moment of just how easy that sort of thing can happen. In fact, I think we move straight into that now. So in terms of how COVID-19 is affecting the cybercrime landscape, remote working, people trying to raise money for charitable endeavours, and people's general unease with the whole situation, these are the things that sort of fuel these frauds. And certainly we've seen this being capitalised on by the fraudsters that we're dealing with. So we look at remote working and how this can affect an organisation and sort of things that can go wrong. Obviously, remote working is tremendously beneficial. Flexibility and productivity generally seem to be the things that people sing and dance about when it comes to remote working, but it does have its pitfalls. And first and foremost, I mean, I'm sat at home today, I'm sure many of us are sat at home today, using hardware that was given to us by our organisation. But when you're at work, you're on a secure network, everything's set up to make sure it's protected. I'm sat here on what I like to think is a relatively well-protected home Wi-Fi network, but I haven't got the resources that Dorset Police have to obviously secure this particular network. I've done my best, and I'm sure everyone else has done their best, obviously, to make sure they keep things nice and safe at home. But your attack surface is much, much wider when it comes to remote working and home working. And that's where the problems sort of start. The other issue as well, shortcuts. So I'll be the first to hold my hand up and say that every now and again, if I'm trying to send a file, for example, and I can't get it to go through our corporate email, we have a file size limit of, I think it's 25 megabytes or something like that. I'll find another way of doing it. And it might be that I use something like Google Drive or Dropbox. And again, my best endeavors, I can make sure I've done my best to protect that account, but it's never going to be as secure as the methods Dorset Police would probably want me to use. So obviously I'm sort of a rock and a hard place. I need to do my job, but I haven't necessarily got the tools I need to do my job because I'm not in the office. And it's these sort of taking shortcuts and finding easier ways of doing things that can really cause us a headache. And that's, I think, what the example I'll give you in just a moment sort of highlights quite nicely. And it's one of the crucial things, IT support. It's much harder to facilitate this remotely. So for us on our corporate laptops, our IT team can dial into them. They can jump straight onto our laptop, do a little bit of remote IT sort of administration, and then they're off before you really even know they've been there. But what if I don't notice something's gone wrong? You know, if I haven't got something in place that detects something is amiss, I might not even notice there's a problem with my laptop. I might not call the IT team in time. I might not be able to put the brakes on something if it's gone wrong. It's a really hard bridge to cross, that one, unfortunately. You know, if you haven't got the IT team just down the corridor to go and speak to, or on the end of a phone to give you a hand with something immediately, these problems can start to creep in. So the example I want to give you, some of you might remember, you might have read last year in local press, and it actually became national and international news eventually, an organisation in our county who fell victim to a ransomware infection. And this all started because one of their members of staff decided they're going to do some work from home. Obviously, ordinarily, I'd imagine an employer is probably more than happy for you to log in on your own time and do a little bit of work. But this chap decided he was going to log in and they have a portal that they have to sign in through, and that gives them access, remote desktop access to their station at work. But this chap couldn't remember where he needed to go. So he turned to your friend and mine, Google. Found a website he thought he was going to log into, entered his email address and his password to log in, thinking he was going to log into his organization, but it wasn't quite as it seemed. So you may or may not know with Google, if you pay enough money, you can have an advert in Google. If you pay enough money for that advert, that will appear at the very top of the listings. So it's quite easy to fudge the sort of results of a Google search. Enough money will get your posting to the very top, basically. And it's exactly what this link was. It was posted by an organization who actually turned out to be the other side of the world in China. A criminal organization who had basically created a fake version of this login portal, just waiting for someone to sign up to it. So along comes this guy, puts in his email address and password. Now this server, little grey box in the middle, that was a compromised server in Germany. And that was sending those details directly over to this criminal organization in China. Now, they had then the details for this guy's corporate account. And we think what we could probably do with that corporate account, there's tons. For this guy, it just so happened that they could find all the details for his email account. And they took it upon themselves to start sending emails out to people. One of them just happened to land in the inbox of another organization in our county. Now, this wave of emails was clearly malicious. Obviously, I think we probably all guessed that by now. But in that email was a document. And that document had some sort of hook. It was something to the effect of, here are the files you've requested, or here's the student information you've asked for. Slip of the tongue there, probably giving away the fact it was a school. I've been trying to avoid using the word school, but it's not that important, so it's okay. Here's student information that you've asked for. So someone gets there, they receive this email and they think, well, it's come from a genuine email account from another school. They had no idea, obviously, they're being compromised. So they trusted it, clicked it. And then before you know it, this school is international news because that link or that document that they've clicked was a piece of ransomware that had ended up encrypting all of the files on their system, basically. An awful lot of the work that they needed to be able to carry on, they weren't able to access. Now, all of this started because one person thought, I'll do a bit of work from home. And they didn't go down the exact right route that they usually would. Now, obviously, there are a series of things that have gone wrong in the interim as well, including obviously not picking up on the fact this this email address, or the email rather, wasn't quite legitimate. But if you don't know what you're looking for with a dodgy email, how can anyone really expect you to stay safe? So I have an example in a moment, a sort of document that this would have been. So hopefully we can have a look at the sort of things you might need to look for if you ever find one of these in your inbox as well. So returning to the office, this is another area where we kind of expect to see people running into issues. Now, obviously, we'd probably expect to get back to work and find out that there are new guidelines, new ways of working. Health and safety documents are plenty with version 1, version 2, version 3 coming out at a rate of knots. Now, these things are probably going to be disseminated by email because you need to make sure everyone gets them. You probably want to know that everyone's received it. And the easiest way to do that, obviously, email. Now, this is something that's been cottoned onto already. Before people even started returning to work or trying to get back into their offices or anything, these campaigns have been picked up on where criminals are sending poisoned documents that masquerade as some sort of coronavirus safety advice. Now, we've seen examples that say, here's the new working practice, have a quick read of this document. We've seen ones that claim to be sort of World Health Organization general guidelines about how to stay safe. I mean, these malicious documents, they're nothing new. If you've ever been to one of my presentations before, obviously I've done a couple with the DCA, so you may well have seen there. I usually bring up this particular example, which I'll show you in a moment. Now, the difficulty is, obviously, whilst these scams aren't new, and you may well think, I'm aware of this and we'll get rid of it. Obviously, the coronavirus and COVID-19, they provide the perfect hook, really, to try and draw people in. Because A, people are expecting these guidelines or this advice from their employer. So something like that landing in their inbox wouldn't really set off any alarm bells. B, people are kind of concerned about it. Obviously, I think it's duly concerned, I think people are about the potential impacts of getting the coronavirus or COVID-19. So there you've got the fear and the fact that people are kind of relaxed because they're at work and they're expecting these things anyway. You can kind of see how those two things will go hand in hand to lead people to click on these things by mistake. So this is the sort of thing we'll expect to see. A document that says it's protected or you need to carry out some further action to be able to view it. Now, this is a very common thing. It used to be quite common, went away for a little while, but now obviously because people are trying to target corporate systems, something that targets corporate software is perfect for it. So Microsoft Office or Office 365, whatever you happen to be using in your organization. So this document, as we see here, hopefully you can see where my cursor is waving, it says protected. Open it in Microsoft Office. Previewing online does not work for protected documents. Now, you're probably aware that protected documents, it's not really a thing as such. You can put a password on a document, which means you won't be able to open it without that password, but it will never pop up with a message like this that says, oh, this is protected, so you need to go up to here and click enable content or enable editing. Now, you'll see if you download a document from an email, for example, you will see something like that, enable editing, or this was downloaded from the internet or something. So if you have it from a trusted contact and you know you're expecting a document, that's probably fine. But if it looks like this and it says protected document, follow these steps, you really need to be quite careful. So if I were to click on enable content, we see next to it that macros have been disabled. Now, if you're not sure what a macro is, the only thing you need to know about macros is that Microsoft developed macros. They put them in as part of their Office suite, and they're a really useful tool to automate certain features. So a couple of buttons or a shortcut will populate a spreadsheet for you, for example, or it will do some calculations. But Microsoft disable macros by default because they know the overwhelming majority of uses for them are malicious. So a macro, it's very, very easy to program a macro, which is basically just a short piece of code. So as soon as you click enable content, it runs an instruction that says to your computer, go to this website, download this piece of software. And you haven't got to do anything beyond that. Literally just press an enable content lets that process happen. Now, obviously something like that, it might be completely harmless, but we'll probably all guess that if it's going to the internet and it's downloading a piece of software that you don't really want, it's probably going to be something harmful. And this is the way we see an awful lot of businesses being hit with ransomware. So a piece of malware that would encrypt the documents on your computer could infect your entire network if it gets far enough into your system. And they'll demand a financial payment, some sort of payment to get your documents returned to you. Obviously, this can be enough to completely sink a business. So some of the demands we've seen, it can be anywhere from a couple of £100 to, I mean, there are companies that have just relatively recently, I think a company in America paid away about 100 million, I think $100 million or something like that, after being hit with a ransomware attack. And so really, if you get a document when you return to your office or even sent to you at home that looks anything like this, or is trying to get you to enable macros or anything like that, be very, very suspicious of it. Now this here, this is the sort of thing that would have come across on the email in the example I just gave. Now I've cut out some of the details at the top because this was very kindly given to me by a victim that we did actually have. And obviously to protect their ID and all that sort of stuff, I've cut out some of the bits that I'd normally show you. But at the very top of this email was a legitimate email address, something that they'd seen, something that they trusted. The rest of it is really where it starts to unravel. So it says it's from a trusted sender. It's a resignation letter. And they're trying to get whoever receives this to click on this document down here, down there, or to click on this here. Now, if you've got SharePoint or you know how SharePoint works, you probably guess that's not really a use case for SharePoint. If you're going to send anything like that, you'd just send an attachment for an email. You wouldn't just upload it to SharePoint and hope somebody found it. The key thing here, now, resignation letter.docx, this is what we call a hyperlink. So behind this, you can put any website that you want, and you can make it appear as anything you want. So this could say happydogsinhats.com or something daft like that. Behind it, I can have www.nastyvirusesforcomputers.web, and you'd never know. The only way you could tell is if you take your time to hover your mouse over this link. Now, in this case, it's exactly what I've done. So I hover my mouse over here. Down the bottom, you can see this massive string of text, veramailer.com, blah, 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 blah. So we'd expect this to say resignation letter.docx, and it'd be a website, a SharePoint website that would take us to this document hosted somewhere on SharePoint. But it's actually going to take us to a third-party website, something completely different that we're not expecting to go to. Now, in the background of this website, I've run this through a couple of the computers we have in our office that are designed basically for us to be able to test links. That particular website has a piece of malware embedded in it. That piece of malware is written to basically reach out to the internet and download further malware and pump that straight into your computer. So simply clicking on resignation letter.docx is enough to infect your computer with one piece of malware that in turn goes to the internet, grabs some more malware, which usually is ransomware, and ends up with that infection taking hold. So with things like this, that's really the best thing you can do. Hover your mouse over this link here, or any link or any button really, in an email or on a website, and check what pops up at the bottom. It might pop up down the bottom here, could pop up in a little box up here. Either way, that'll tell you the real destination of those buttons and hopefully save you quite a sizable headache. I'll move into some of the sort of scams that we've seen being reported. As it says at the top here, really, we didn't really expect people to let this opportunity go to waste. Plenty of scams that have been doing the rounds. So the sudden need for PPE. Obviously saw an awful lot of scam websites popping up on the internet that would offer bulk quantities of these items. And they might be that they're quite hard to find. So you think, oh, brilliant, someone's got them in stock. It could be that obviously these people have them an awful lot cheaper than everywhere else, so you're tempted because of the price. There could be any number of reasons, scarcity or bargain prices, that people are led to these sort of bogus websites. So just to give you a bit of a feel for how big that problem was, back in March, in a single 24-hour period, 35,000 websites were registered that had coronavirus in one form or another in the address of that website. Now, obviously, the majority of these were going to be set up for these sort of scams, with people trying to sell fake goods or trying to raise money, in inverted commas, for charitable causes. And like I say at the bottom here, as with the virus itself, clearly we're not out of the woods yet, and there are more and more opportunities presenting themselves every day for people to try and capitalize on on this situation. So we did expect early doors, there's a huge concern that we're going to see a massive spike in cybercrime reporting. We have the numbers, we're going to go through the roof. And sorry, just 1 second. I've just noticed my little battery warnings popped up and I don't want to be logged off. So I'm just going to plug my computer in. There we go. Sorry about that. So the initial concern was that we're going to see a huge spike in reporting of cybercrime and we're going to be inundated with reports. And we have seen an increase, and predictably, obviously the coronavirus and COVID-19 have been really common features in the reports that we get coming into our office at the moment. But the reality is, whilst we haven't seen the increase in reporting that we expected, what we have seen is an awful lot of rebranding, let's say. So familiar scams that have been repackaged as something coronavirus specific. And there's the example here of the HMRC refund. So you might have had a text message come through on your phone that says, as part of the nation's attempt to recover from coronavirus, the government are giving everyone a refund on their taxes. Now, even during good times, I think we can all agree the government are rarely that generous. And when they need the money to try and obviously help the NHS, they're not going to be giving out money willy-nilly to people to try and sort of just, well, I don't know what the intent would be really on this one. But very common sort of thing that we saw, text messages going around to plenty of people, trying to get them to click on this link and go through and claim a refund that they'd never get. So we see the sort of details that they're after here. Obviously, profile details, so they're going to be asking for your name, your age, all that sort of stuff. Card details, obviously, so they claim it so they can deposit the money into your account, but I think we've all gathered that's probably not what they're actually going to be doing. So this sort of thing, you can kind of see how effective that's going to be. Furloughed workers who are worried about their job, maybe people have already found themselves out of work, and maybe they think, brilliant, tax rebate, it's the lifeline I need to keep me and my family fed. Okay? It's such an effective scam because it plays on people's emotions. It sort of can really latch on to that sort of emotional response. And it's what we call social engineering. So exploiting a person's emotions to get them to act against their better judgment. And we see it again in this example here for the sale of rapid home testing kits. Now, this is one of those things, the fake online auction sites or fake online sales rather that top the charts basically endorse it for the type of fraud that we're seeing being reported. And you can see why this sort of thing would be so effective. Social engineering is the lifeblood of most scams. Fear is one of the most often exploited emotions. Now, they know at the moment that an awful lot of people are sort of concerned for their well-being, maybe the welfare of themselves and their family. So they get that into the right email inbox, and there's someone who thinks, oh, I could check myself, make sure I'm healthy, then I'll be able to go see an elderly relative or such and such. People will chuck money into this sort of scam because they think they're doing the right thing to be able to test themselves and make sure they're safe. And they know really how to capitalize on that and, well, like I say, exploit people's concerns and exploit people's well-beings. Now, there are some scams that have taken things sort of to the extreme. This is one of the stranger ones that we've seen. And I'll give you a bit of an example as to how far the sort of scamming has actually gone. And you may well have seen this. It was in the news a little while ago, the 5G BioShield. Now, this will protect people against the harmful effects of 5G, obviously the future of mobile phones and how the internet's going to work, basically. And there's been a theory being banded around that doesn't have any real basis in fact, that 5G has helped proliferate the coronavirus or COVID-19 outbreak. So this company has started selling a device with proprietary holographic nanolayer technology that will protect you against the harmful effects of 5G and help keep you safe. We see the striking similarity between this device on the left and this one on the right. A bulk purchase, 128 gigabyte USB stick that can be cheaply purchased and customized, which is exactly what they've done. So this here is a sort of St. George and the Dragon crest. This here is just a cheap sticker. So they've an awful lot of these, customized them, and they're selling them on for £283 a pop to people because people are, to an extent, understandably concerned that maybe there's something they can do to help keep themselves safe. 283 quid for sort of £2 or £3 USB stick It really is at the far end of the sort of scams that we've seen. Thankfully, we haven't had any reports of this locally. This is just one that has been doing the rounds. I always say this, you know, there's a scam out there for everyone. So some of those examples might have seemed a little bit outlandish or something that you probably wouldn't fall for yourself. But I know full well that on the right day, if someone were to drop an email in my inbox, something about golf, let's say, I might think, oh, I probably haven't seen this actually, let's have a look. And if I'm not paying attention on that day, they might catch me out. My nan, for example, she's more likely to fall for your BT engineer scams, whereas maybe if I ever trusted cryptocurrency, I might fall for something along those lines. You know, if there's an emotion to exploit, fear, joy, curiosity, there is a way that people can trick us, basically, a door that people can use to get to us and take our money. And one of the biggest things we've got at the moment, and I think one of the ones that's going to cause us the biggest headache in the next sort of few weeks and months, the NHS test and trace system. Now, this is something that I think could be brilliant. It's one of those things that, if executed properly, will really help in the sort of fight against this pandemic. One of the key things with it, obviously, the need for the app that would have come along with it would cut down on an awful lot of the potential pitfalls. However, we're still waiting for that. So NHS test and trace, I'm sure everyone's aware, it's designed to notify you if you've been exposed to someone with coronavirus or COVID-19, and they'll do this by telephone. So an NHS contact tracer will call anyone who's been affected. We've already seen examples of people misrepresenting themselves to target us. So in most cases, the scammer will call and advise that someone's been in contact with someone who has COVID-19, and they need to pay a fee for a testing kit to be delivered, 50 quid, relatively nominal fee, for this kit to be delivered to your front door. Thankfully, no one in Dorset, to my knowledge, has actually fallen for this yet. Most people are obviously very aware of the fact that this is free. We don't have to worry about paying for this stuff. So there are some things, obviously, to remember when it comes to NHS test and trace. Contact tracers, there are two things that they definitely will do. And if they call you, it will be from this telephone number here, 0300 0135 000. And if they ask you to go to a website, it's only ever going to be this one, contact-tracing.phg.gov.uk. That's all well and good. The key problem here, you can spoof a telephone number with a few buttons. On a computer, if I go to the right website or load the right piece of software, couple of clicks, and I could look like I'm calling somebody from that telephone number myself. And we take a look at these two links, contact-tracing.phg.gov.uk. Now that was smaller and embedded in an email. At a glance, would you, if you're honest with yourself, would you pick up on the fact that's a dash in the second email at phg-gov.uk? That small difference takes you to a completely different website, and it might look exactly the same. You might give the exact same information, but obviously the second one, completely fake. And this is where the problem comes in. We're sort of relying on people just to trust that what they're sent is accurate. And unfortunately, the advice that contact tracers will be you'll be able to tell who the genuine ones are because they'll sound professional, which is what I think the official line was. Isn't really good enough, unfortunately. So we'll go through a few of the things that definitely won't happen on the test and trace service. So they'll never ask you to ring a premium rate number. You'll never be asked for a payment, never be asked for bank details. They'll never ask for your social media details or logins. Now that one seems a bit strange, but you can kind of see why they'd ask for that. Because if they'd say, right, we need to know who you've been with, who your friends are, because we need to get in touch with them. So can we have a look at your Facebook, for example? Passwords and PIN numbers, they'll never ask you for that. You'll never have to purchase a product, including a testing kit. I'm going to skip this one quickly and come back to this, but they'll never ask you to access any website that doesn't belong to the NHS or the government. Now, contact-tracing.phg.gov.uk should be the only one they ask you to go to. Now, the official advice is that they won't ask you to download any software. That will eventually change, obviously, when this app becomes available. And I do think that's going to be the key thing that helps cut down on the potential fraud and scams when it comes to a test and trace service. So fingers crossed that's not too far down the line. So a few things that we can do to help keep ourselves safe. Hopefully I'm not overrunning too badly, so I will pick up the pace just in case. Strong passwords. Obviously, protecting our accounts with a decent, strong password is key. So, dog's name, year of birth, no good. Something like, so the NCSE recommend a passphrase, 3 random words strung together to make a passphrase. So we take the words space, horse, and window. Just picture those strung together, and you take out your S and put a 5 in there, your E and put a 3 in there, your O and put a 0. You've got yourself quite a long, complex password all of a sudden that's quite easy to remember, but very, very hard to guess. Things like that, and password managers, plenty of different solutions to make a password that's stronger than where you went on a holiday last year, for example, which is another quite common one that people use. Two-factor authentication. I'll show you a website in just a moment, or at least give you a link to a website in just a moment that does a much better job of explaining it, but I can't say enough about how effective two-factor authentication is to protect your accounts. Makes it slightly trickier to log in, but it makes it much, much harder for someone to break in as well. I'll let the website do the talking on that one, because I'll probably just make it confusing for you. Antivirus software. You should have that on every computer. You should have that on every mobile phone and tablet. The most important thing is you need to make sure it's up to date. Now, the reason I say that is because I think last study I read, 400,000 new pieces of malware released every single day into the internet, and your antivirus software can only ever protect you from the ones it knows about. So make sure you update every time you use your computer. Backing stuff up. So a second, third, even fourth copy of everything that you care about. So if you accidentally click on that one link that takes you to a piece of ransomware somewhere and your computer gets infected, you don't have to worry about paying a ransom to get your files back if you've already got a second copy on a hard drive in your laptop bag or in your desk somewhere. So backing stuff up, really, really good idea. And physical security. Now I'm sat a couple of feet away from my laptop at the moment, and as a rule of thumb, this is probably about as far away as I would usually get from my laptop, particularly whilst it's logged in and sort of accessible. But physical security is one of those things that people overlook quite a lot. When you're allowed to go into coffee shops way back when, a distant sort of faded memory, how often would you see someone get up, leave their laptop behind and go grab themselves a cup of coffee? They care more about losing their seat than they do their laptop. It's so easy to take that laptop and then get all the information you could possibly want from it, really. So we need to make sure we're taking the steps to protect our devices physically as well. Lastly, I forgot about these popping up. There's me rambling on about stuff. These here, a few resources for you, a few places to go for that further information. So the NCSE website, brilliant, a treasure trove rather of information for you. Small to medium enterprises, large organizations, all the way up to public sector bodies and multinational corporations. There are sections on the NCSE website for advice, and that is suitable for you, really. actionfraud.police.uk. Fingers crossed you never really need that website. That's where we ask that you would go if you need to report fraud or cybercrime. There's also a ton of information on there about new and emerging scams and things that are worth keeping an eye on, basically, to keep yourself safe. HaveIBeenPwned.com. Now, that's a brilliant website. You can go on there, put in your email address, and it searches databases of sort of known data breaches to see if your email address and password have been exposed and are available on the internet. So if it does crop up and say that your details have been exposed, it gives you a guide to changing your passwords and resecuring your account. Really, really useful. I'd urge you all to have a look at that, really. At the end of this webinar, go have a look. You might be shocked as to what you find on there, but don't worry. If you are on there, really easy to fix it. Just follow the steps that they give you and you'll be okay. Lastly, turnon2fa.com. Now that's the one I said about a minute ago that gives you all the guidance you need about two-factor authentication. Have a look at that one as well. That'd be really useful. This here, the Small Charities Guide. Now this is specific guidance from the National Cybersecurity Centre about what you could look to do to secure your organisation cheaply, sometimes even for free. You can go to that website, ncse.gov.uk/collection/charity, download this guide and the charity sector threat assessment from there. If you don't want to go to that, that's my email address at the bottom there, cybercrimeprevention@dorset.pn.police.uk. I have that on my laptop ready to send if anyone is interested in a copy. Like I say, you can download it yourself from here, or I'm more than happy to send a copy with a couple of other resources as well, if you drop me an email on that one. Very, very conscious of the fact that I've probably hugely overrun. So I'm going to call it a day there and stop. I'm in no rush to leave at the end of this, so if there are any questions, obviously feel free to send them over to me and I'll do my best to answer them. Or alternatively, obviously that email address, cybercrimeprevention@dorset.pn.police.uk. Feel free to send over anything on there as well, and I shall do my best to answer them. I shall stop sharing my screen now and hand you back over.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's really interesting, and I guess I would thoroughly recommend everybody to have a look at that charity's information on how you can protect yourself from cybercrime and what you can do, particularly at low cost, and to perhaps think about that if you're considering putting in funding applications for recovery and restarting your operations. Obviously, a lot of us are having to work differently, and that is very much about remote working. I know a lot of charities, volunteers, trustees work from home and use their own computers rather than having a corporate computer or a company computer. If you do need to think about improving the security on that to run your charity effectively, then think about the costs of what that could be, and maybe include that within an application to some of the funds that we're beginning to see emerging around recovery and restarting. It's a good opportunity to ensure that you're protecting yourself, your organisation, your volunteers and your beneficiaries from any of those scams. So yes, if you do have any questions, then please post them to, I don't know if Chris, if people post them to into the chat, are you willing to answer them now? So if you do have any questions, post them to the chat, but I'm going to crack on and talk about the guidance that has come out towards the end of June, beginning of July, from the fundraising regulator and the Institute of Fundraising. So the reason, I'm going to share my screen, so bear with me. The reason for saying this is, or to give you this update, or to take you through what's come out of the fund from these two organisations, is actually charities and not-for-profit and voluntary organisations, in terms of fundraising, rely on public trust. The public need to feel confident and trust those charitable organisations that are undertaking fundraising to be able to donate. So instilling that confidence and public trust and showing that you're doing everything you can to also avoid, you know, looking like you're a scam or scamming, or so doing everything above board is a way of ensuring that you can maintain, improve public trust in your charity, and therefore maintain and get donations to support what you're doing. So I thought it would be worthwhile just to go through the sort of the key principles that are coming out of the latest guidance from those two national bodies. They have put together this guidance in consultation with Public Health England and the Health and Safety Executive. And they're to obviously we're all keen to start raising our income, doing fundraising activities to support our activities going forward, but it's to support you resume those fundraising activities responsibly, and so that any activities, any fundraising activities or events that you hold or carry out are done so safely and responsibly. So the guides basically cover how you plan your fundraising activities, obviously undertaking risk assessments. We've been talking a lot about risk assessments over the last couple of weeks, making sure that the public, your staff and volunteers are safe, but also about how you interact with members of the public. As with, I hope Chris's slides, but these slides will definitely be on the DCA website, so the links will be made available after today's presentation, so please don't worry about that. I think the first thing to actually do is really carefully consider whether now is the right time to start doing that physical, sort of more face-to-face type fundraising, and weigh up the benefits of starting fundraising against the risks. Do you have the staff and volunteers to run fundraising activities? We all know that those fundraising activities, they're fantastic. Social events, they're good at raising profile about what we're doing, but actually they're quite resource intensive. So do you have the number of staff and volunteers available to do that safely? And that's the key. It's about doing it safely. Also, do you have the equipment and tools that you need to make sure, again, that you can do it safely? So that's thinking about things like hand sanitizer, so you can do the cleaning regime, and maybe having an online booking system so you can manage numbers attending, maintaining social distancing, and whether you need any sort of more electronic equipment, iPads or tablets to help you manage the events. And some of that will come out as I be made clear as I talk for the rest of the next bit. And again, if you do want to return to fundraising and you think that that you would benefit from having some of those tools and equipment, then think about including the costs of those in any funding applications that you might be thinking about putting together. So also think about if people have just returned from furlough, or if your volunteers have been shielding, they may not quite feel confident or ready to go back out and face the public yet. So please take into consideration the needs and confidence of your staff and volunteers before rushing into fundraising again. And the other thing to consider is, how is your target audience, so the people that you'd want to attend your fundraising activity, how do you think they would react to you starting up doing a fundraising activity? We know that, because I think 2 million people in the UK have been shielding, we expect the impact on our mental health, not just those that have been shielding, but the impact of lockdown is going to have an impact on our mental health, and we don't know how that's actually going to play out. But we know also, you can assume or maybe understand that there's going to be increased anxiety about social contact and social interaction. So just think about whether it's actually quite the right time to go out and start fundraising again. The guidance says that you should only start fundraising or restart fundraising when your organisation is satisfied that it can be done safely, in line with the guidance and following relevant government advice, and where the associated risks of the fundraising activity, the location or the venue that you're going to be using can be properly managed. And to remember that your trustees will ultimately be responsible for any decisions made. So make sure all your discussions around deciding to return to doing like more physical fundraising activities are well documented and minuted within your trustee or your management committee meetings. I'm going to move on. Oops, sorry, I've gone too far now. Oh, that's just, I think we're there. Okay. Follow the government guidance. We're just going to say this again and again and again. Follow the government guidance. The government guidance is likely to change and be updated as the lockdown eases, as shielding comes to an end. So please stay up to date with the government guidance. I know that DCA is doing everything it possibly can to keep up to date with it and post updates on our website. But this applies to the activity that you want to do, so your fundraising activity, and also the venue that you want to use. So for example, if you were going to use a village hall to do a fundraising activity, then look at the village hall and the community building guidance to find out what you can and can't do within those venues. Again, I'll say a little bit more in a minute that might help make some sense about that. We always say about planning when you're planning fundraising, but actually in this instance, longer term planning is going to be quite hard to do because the guidance is updating regularly. At the last minute, things change. So whatever plans you put in place, they're going to need to be flexible and adaptable. Also, you may find that suddenly one of your volunteers has been tested for or is showing symptoms COVID-19, what's the impact of that on your fundraising activity? Do you have, because whoever that person's been in contact with will have to self-isolate, they have to self-isolate, and the team, the people they've been in contact with, will have to isolate. So what's the impact of that on your team? Are you going to be able to continue with that activity that you hope to do? It may be that as a result of that, you're going to have to postpone or even cancel the event. So these are things you need to consider. And I feel like I'm being a bit doom and gloom. Obviously, you need to undertake a risk assessment. So that's undertaking a risk assessment of both the venue you're going to use, but also the activity or the event you're going to run. And obviously properly document your risk assessment with the risks, with any sort of mitigating measures that you're going to put in place, and then review that regularly leading up to the event to make sure that nothing's changed. There's good guidance on the Health and Safety Executive about carrying out risk assessments. So it's about keeping the public safe and your staff and your volunteers. It's a good idea to involve your volunteers or your staff team, your fundraising team, in developing that risk assessment, because they should have prior knowledge of the types of risks and things to consider. But also it's really, really, really important that you share that risk assessment with the team so they fully understand what needs to be done to manage the risks on the day of the activity. And so that should be part of your sort of pre-event training or briefing. This is unlikely in Dorset, but it might be possible. If you're an organisation that employs 50 workers, then the government expects you to publish your risk assessment on your website. So it's about sharing your risk assessment so people understand what you're doing to make them safe, or to help them be safe. Listen to feedback from both your staff and your volunteers, but also anybody else, so your stakeholders, about how they feel, or any complaints they may have about your fundraising or proposed fundraising, and take that on board. If people don't feel comfortable with doing it and they're not going to turn up, that fundraising activity may not have the best outcome that you were hoping for. So it might be better just to wait a little bit longer to a time when people are feeling more comfortable, and then you'll get a better return from your investment. And we all know how timely and costly running fundraising events can be, and you want to make them the best that they possibly can to benefit your organisation and your beneficiaries. So what I was saying about following the government guidance about what you can and can't do. So my example would be, I think I'm just going to, so a typical fundraising event, those that know me will probably just laugh, is that you might put on a 24 aerobathon in a gym. Gyms aren't open at the moment, you can't do it. Aerobics isn't allowed because it's considered an activity that would take place within a gym. So there's an activity in a venue that you're not legally allowed to use according to government guidance at this point in time. However, if you decided to do a 24-hour hula hoop-a-thon in a big field where everybody can be 2 meters socially distanced apart, and you took measures where they brought their own hula hoops, their own water, their own towels, and you provided hand sanitizer, that could be something that you could do. So that's one thing saying about look at the most relevant, most up-to-date, most recent government guidance, both about the activities, but also about the venues, because you need to be clear about what you can and what you can't do, and choose your activity accordingly. Sorry, they're really silly examples, but hopefully they make the point. Follow the government guidance about working safely. So that's all things thinking about hand washing, sanitizer, minimising close proximity gatherings, minimising the length of time that you actually spend together, which can reduce the risk of transmission if somebody does have COVID-19, staggering arrival and departure times, using screens or barriers to separate people as much as possible. If you're going to sit people down, sit them back to back or side by side seating. So those are some of the measures that comes out of the sort of working safely and guidance that can help minimise the risks. As Chris said, you will need to collect data, some personal information for the test and trace. I keep on saying, well, I keep on wanting to say track and trace, but test and trace system. So you've also got to think about how you're going to collect that personal information safely. So it could be that actually you have an iPad or a tablet that people sign on in, that you can wipe down before and after people have used it. You could ask for people to pre-book via an online booking system, such as Eventbrite, for example. So you can collect that data, so that if, as a result of your activity, you find out that well, not as a result, but if somebody coming to your activity ends up having symptoms or COVID coronavirus, that you be able to, through the test and trace system, inform everybody about it, and they can take the self-isolation measures. You also need to hold that data for 21 days. Train your volunteers, train your fundraising team on what the process is for the day, how they can make people feel safe, how they can stay safe themselves. So that's really around your risk assessment. At the moment, the government guideline says that any training would need to be done virtually. So therefore you'd have to hold maybe a Zoom or a Teams meeting beforehand where you can train your staff so that they understand what needs to be done on the day. Consider the needs of those people attending your event. Now, it may be that people come to your event or activity that are more vulnerable. So just be aware, as I know as the sector is, of how that information, to make them feel comfortable and confident and informed about whatever decision they need to make about making a donation, they have that information in a way that's accessible to them. As I say, we expect that there's heightened levels of anxiety and probably an increase in mental health issues. So we need to be considerate of that. I know this sector and the people that work in this sector are, but it's worthwhile just reiterating it. There's also guidance, separate guidance, and again, there are links to public fundraising. So this is sort of the more face-to-face fundraising. Sometimes you'll see people, or you may even take part in being on a street, on a high street or a shopping centre, or you may have been allowed to go inside or just outside a supermarket to do fundraising activities. So there's also guidance around how to do that safely. Actually, I think some of the principles within this public fundraising guidance is quite useful for any sort of fundraising, like more physical fundraising that you're thinking about possibly starting it up again. A lot of it is just reiteration of stuff I've already said. So it's around, good hygiene and hand sanitisation. So if having sanitizer, hand sanitizer, giving all your volunteers and staff that are doing the fundraising hand sanitizer is one way of reducing those risks. Again, that's a cost to you. How are you going to cover that cost? You also need to clean any frequently touched equipment. So door handles, minimise the use of shared equipment. So again, there may be things that you need to consider purchasing to enable you to fundraise safely. And if you need to buy additional equipment to make sure you can fundraise and that your organisation is sustainable in the future, then think about putting in a grant application to cover those costs. Follow social distancing guidance. you all know by now the 2 meters or the 1 meter plus, but there are other things that you may need to consider about if you're out in the street. So that might be just, you know, giving way to the public and staying still so that people can see where you are, having good signage or floor marking. So again, people know how far they need to be away from you, and just maintain that social distancing. And if you are exchanging items, then you need to review how you exchange items, and if you can, keep this to a minimum. So, for example, often if I've given to street fundraisers, for example, and I or my children have been given a sticker for our donation, or a badge, or a leaflet. Keep these to a minimum if you can. Or do it in a way that's safe. I don't actually know how you do it in a way that's safe, other than wiping it down with hand sanitizer before and after you've given it to them. So it may actually not be worthwhile. It may be better if you want to give them something, to send them something in the post or via an email address afterwards, because you'll be collecting their some data anyway, because you've had contact with them. If you're doing a prize draw or a raffle, so this is where it's probably a little bit more relevant, then again, think about how you can deliver their or give them the prizes if they've won. And this again could be either putting things through the post or arranging them to pick up their prize from a particular location, or using more virtual vouchers and electronic means of giving them prizes rather than actual physical prizes. Again, if you're going to start posting items out to people, that's going to increase the cost of your fundraising activity. I've mentioned about people maybe feeling more anxious. So again, being polite and respectful, mindful of how people might respond. And if people are responding to you in a maybe negative way or an anxious way, then feed that back to your organisation, because that can be taken on board and taken into account for the next fundraising activity that you want to consider putting on. The biggest thing is how you actually process donations. We know that a lot of people have not been handing cash or providing cash. So if you can use a contactless payment system, then again, that's an additional cost. Look into it. If people have a mobile phone, then maybe they'd like to make an online donation via a mobile banking app. So again, make sure that your volunteers or your fundraising team have the details to enable people to do that. There's probably a whole host of issues that Chris is probably sitting squirming thinking, oh my gosh, that's quite dangerous. So make sure that you're being open and accountable in terms of how you take donations. It could also be that if your organisation has a website with an online donation button, having a laptop or an iPad or a tablet while you're at the fundraising location could be a way that people again make a donation without actually having to pass you cash. Again, you just need to make sure that you sanitize the screen before and after each person using the tablet. So that's really, in a whistle-stop tour, what the guidance says. It probably leaves more questions than answers, but do read the full guidance. I would say that maybe perhaps at the moment there are other ways to fundraise, and if you can, maybe considering fundraising via crowdfunding or moving to online donations and getting the tools and training to enable you to do this is definitely a good thing to do and consideration. If you can, go outside. The restrictions on doing things outdoors are much less than doing things indoors. and you can have larger groups of people, but there are still limits on how many people you can have. So think about, if you're running a fundraising activity, can you do it outside? But whatever you do, it's going to be a different experience. Fundraising in the past has always been very much a social gathering, a get together, almost a celebration of what you do and what you've achieved. That's not going to be possible going forward. Having those social gatherings and chance to socialize are going to be minimum and more, and they should be kept to a minimum so that we don't encourage the spread of the virus. So whatever we do out in terms of our fundraising going forward, it is going to be different to how it was in the past for at least the foreseeable future. So I feel like I've been a bit of a voice of doom and gloom. It is possible, it's just different. So what I want to end on is some positive things, which is there are funds available for you. We've talked about, I'm just looking for the right bit of information. So you may have seen that Wessex Water Community Fund, there was an announcement that they're making lots of money available to communities. It's being administered through the Dorset Community Foundation. I got in touch with Ellie, the grants manager there. They're waiting to hear how that's going to come to them and how they're going to distribute. But in the short term, at least, it's probably more than likely going to be through the Dorset Community Coronavirus Fund, the one that is currently running. It's also worthwhile to say that that emergency fund is going to come to an end, and that they're going to look at a recovery grant phase, a phase 2, which will move towards like recovering and restarting. And they hope to announce that in the next 2 to 3 weeks' time. They're still finalising details of what that's going to look like and who will be able to apply. So when it is launched, as with all funding, please read the criteria carefully. Also, what we're hoping is going to hear about being launched in the next 3 to 4 weeks is the Dorset Council Community Fund. There's no details at the moment, but we are quite hopeful that someone from Dorset Council will join us at a future webinar and give us an update on exactly what that fund is going to support and who can apply for it. So do keep an eye out on the DCA website, but also, and e-bulletin and things for updates. So I'm really overrunning. We also heard about the arts grants. So when you get this slide on the DCA website, if you click on the links, it will take you to the information about the grant. Good ones for most community groups are Screwfix, which has just been announced, and the other ones are a little bit more niche, shall I say. So the Julia and Hans Rousing are for arts, the Theatre Artist Fund is obviously for arts, and the Edge is for education. So please do have a look at that. But I think it's now time for me to stop sharing my screen. And I am handing over to Jo, who's going to give us the final bit of update in terms of government guidance and things like that. So thank you very much for listening, and here's Jo.
I'm afraid I'm going to do a bit of screen sharing as well. It's I think it's so that we can't see ourselves when we're presenting. It's a good way of hiding ourselves. All right, let's see if I can do it. Where are we? Come on, you know you want to. Let's do a slideshow. Today would be quite nice. Okay. The one thing that we're all aware of is the fact that shielding finishes on the 1st of August. Food parcels for those people that have been shielding and that are vulnerable will be finishing at the end of July. They're not going to be able to come out of their homes confidently on the 1st of August and say, fantastic, everything's back to normal, because that's not going to be the case. It's going to be a brand new world for many, many people when they come out. They've been stuck in their homes since March. When they go into shops, they're suddenly going to find that they've got the 2-meter distance to queue. When they go into the shop, they're going to find they're not able to go up one aisle and straight down another one as they used to. They now have to follow the patterns. And they're going to find that when it comes to paying, they're more likely to need contactless payments, and that some places don't accept cash anymore. So it really is going to be a very, very different place. And of course, there's the restaurants and pubs that we all know about. So the one thing that we would say about that is lots and lots of community groups are still going. Some community groups may change because some people are going back to work now that furloughing is also changing. So they might need more volunteers, and the volunteer centre is there to be contacted so that they can help you fill in the gaps. The test and trace that they keep going on about is now up and running. Of course, if you've been in contact with someone that has tested positive for the coronavirus, then you need to go into quarantine for 14 days. Now, if you're a volunteer and you have been helping Mrs. Jones down the road with her shopping, someone is going to need to take your place, because unfortunately the virus won't close on the 31st of July. It is still going to carry on. So please don't shut the COVID-19 groups down too soon. And as I said in the previous slide, if you are losing volunteers because people are going back to work, or you're suddenly having to quarantine, then get back in touch with the volunteer centre. Now, another thing that the volunteer centre, Dorset Community Action and Help and Kindness have been doing, we've been working behind the scenes with lots of the community groups that have been set up during the COVID-19 time. We've called them micro communities because a lot of them are communities within a village, or they might be communities that just live along one road and they're helping neighbours. And we've given them all advice and guidance as the time has gone along to make sure that they're protecting themselves when they do deliveries. They make sure they social distance, they make sure that they wash their hands after they've touched things that have been delivered, making sure that they're protecting themselves and other people when it comes to masks and all the sorts of stuff that we're becoming very, very familiar with. We asked 160 different groups volunteered with the Volunteer Centre Dorset that registered, and we asked them all, would they like to have somewhere where they can have a chat to somebody else that's also running a group, because different people have slightly different ideas, and they have the opportunity then to be able to look at what is Fontmell Magna doing compared with someone in Sherborne. It might be that just by tweaking something, it makes work a little bit easier for the volunteers. So we've started a Facebook community for the moment. It's a closed group just while we get going and we understand the needs of the micro communities to make sure that we are providing something that they want to use. And at the same time, in the background, Help and Kindness are building a platform which will be a permanent feature, a secure feature, which sits on their Help and Kindness platform to help with the Dorset communities together, who are the micro communities who are able to talk to each other and share these ideas. So that's going to be coming soon, but I just thought I'd give you the heads up on that. Then we've issued many, many updates and guides, and I don't know about you, but I should imagine you get to the stage where you look at the next updated guide and you think, okay, so what's different about that? And you're having to compare June the 6th with June the 15th or June the 7th with June the 8th, just to see the odd sentence that's changed to help you. Now, we have tried our absolute utmost to get as many of those updates and guides out to you, but we would like to know if we've left any gaps. Are there any areas that you feel that we haven't covered? Because it's you that's using that guidance, so you will be the ones to tell us what you found is really, really good and what you found no, actually, we could have done with some more information about that. So please get in touch with us if you have got something to say about that. And then my last slide. I expect many of you recognise this particular link. It's I think it must be one of the most well-used ones in Dorset, but it is the link for the latest updates for ACRE. ACRE have published more guidance about the multi-purpose buildings. So, for example, if you've got a social club but you hire out some of the rooms in your hall, or you've got a hall that you use for example, sports because you've got the lines marked out on your floor, or you have yoga or book reading, that type of thing, in all the different things. The new guidance has come out on that. COVID-19 safeguarding, I'll come back to that bit in a moment. Funding I don't need to go over because I think Anita has completely and utterly covered that. Volunteering, we're saying please, please, please keep volunteering. Please keep in touch with the volunteer centre because you are still very much needed. Your volunteer role may change because the circumstances changing, but you are still really valued. So please, please stay with us. Now, the COVID-19, I said I'd come back to. The reason for that is because next week's webinar is going to be about safeguarding. Lots and lots of changes have happened. It's knowing the latest updates for safeguarding because of the COVID-19. It's knowing more about being safe when you're on the internet, when you're contacting people, making sure that you are keeping people's details safe. For example, with the test and trace, you have to keep people's details for 21 days. And that's part of safeguarding because you need to keep people's details secure. So we'll be looking into that next week, and our webinar is at the usual time, 11:30 next Wednesday. And I hope very much to see you all there. Is there anything else that anybody else would like to say, or have I just finished the webinar quite neatly?
No, sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you, Jo. I'm just going to stop recording, just so you know.